Hello there, this is Miss Nakayama, and today is the last lesson for our chapter 6. We are talking about inequalities in two triangles as opposed to one triangle in our previous lesson. So the first theorem that we have is something called the hinge theorem. Then we're going to talk about its converse. So to talk about the hinge theorem, I want you to think about it and know that sometimes it's been called, and my thing wasn't writing properly, the SAS inequality. You can put a symbol, you can write the word inequality theorem, okay? Because SAS, because side, angle, side. If the side of one triangle is congruent to another side in another triangle, and then there's another pair of congruent sides, and the angle in between them are not equal, then the sides are unequal in the same order. So I have a pair of congruent sides, another pair of congruent sides. Because this angle V is larger than this angle R, then we know the side opposite V, which is XW, has to be greater than the side opposite R, which is ST. The converse just tells you just what it says. It's the converse. That one, we're starting with the sides and going to the angles. Okay? You don't necessarily have to know which one's which. You just got to know how to use it. And I'm telling you, you want to remember that it's sometimes referred to as a SAS inequality theorem because it has to do with the fact that the things are unequal, and it has to do with the fact SAS, it has to have the angle in between the two sides. So down here, if two sides of one triangle are congruent to two sides of another, and the third sides are not congruent, then the angles opposite those sides are not congruent in the same way. So since 12 is bigger than 9, we know that angle C is larger than angle F. So let's go do them. And by the way, in case I didn't say it, sorry if I don't remember, if those two angles were equal, y'all, we would have congruent triangles. That's what we talked about back in chapter 5. Okay. Or maybe it was earlier. Anyway. All right. So examples. Given that segment AB is congruent to segment DE and segment BC is congruent to EF, so segment EF. So basically, they're telling us we got two sides of one triangle congruent to two sides of another triangle. And they're telling us the third sides are congruent. So how do the two angles opposite those sides compare? Well, angle B is opposite 11, angle E is opposite 10. So that tells me that angle B has to be larger than angle E. Number 2, given that segment AB is congruent to segment DE and segment BC is congruent to segment EC, again, I have two sides of one triangle being congruent to two sides of another triangle. The angles in between them are not congruent. Therefore, the sides, we're looking at AC and DC. How do they compare? Well, AC is larger, opposite the larger angle, so AC is going to be larger than DC. Okay, look at number 3. I've got two sides that are congruent. PR is congruent to PS, or PR equals PS, and the measure of angle QPR. QPR. So this angle here is larger than QPS. So which side has to be longer? And you kind of go, you should stop and think that, wait, they only told us one side. But of course, y'all know that the other side that's congruent is this one right here. So this is still an example of side angle side, the angles in between it. But they told us that angle P up here, QPR, was larger than QPS. So that means that the side RQ has to be larger than the side SQ. So that's going to be your answer. All right, look at the next one. Same triangle, PR is equal to PS. This time they tell us that RQ, segment RQ, is less than, I'm going to just make it 3, and SQ 1, 2, 3, 4, because SQ is bigger. So in this case, we'll get those out of our way. Which is larger, angle RPQ or SPQ? Well, I put the more tick marks with the bigger side. So the angle opposite more tick marks is going to be angle P. So that's going to be your angle. Look at number 4. What can you conclude about the measures of angles A and Q in this figure? So A and Q, again, two sides of one triangle congruent to two sides of another. The third sides are not equal. A is across from 26. Q is across from 27. So A would have to be less than Q. All right, write an inequality or equal sign relating the given side lengths or angle measures, or state no conclusion if there's not enough information. So we have two sides are congruent. AB is congruent to AD. And we know that, we know that this angle is congruent to itself. This side is congruent to itself. And we know that the third side, so you might, if you have any trouble with this, y'all, across from angle 1 is a side length of 10. Across from angle 2 is a side length of 7. So that means that the measure of angle 1 has to be larger than the measure of angle 2. Okay? Now we go to 6. I have XY is congruent to YZ. I know that BY is congruent to itself, but I know that across from XB is angle with measures 24 degrees, and across from 26 is an angle that measures 26 degrees. So we know that XB has to be less than BZ. Okay, number 7, I have two sides that are congruent. DF is congruent to DE is congruent to EG. And I know that EF is congruent to itself, so I can mark that. And you might want to go ahead and say, okay, 51, but what is opposite DF? What angle is opposite DF is E. And we actually don't know that. So since we don't know angle E, that's an example that this is not following SAS inequality theorem or the hinge theorem. So therefore you cannot make a conclusion based on this. All right, last two problems. Find the range of possible values for each variable. So I have two triangles here, and I can see that two sides are congruent. And of course, I know that this side is congruent to itself. And then they tell me the third side. So the third side, 15 is larger than 10. So that means 60 has to be larger than 5x minus 20. So 5x minus 20, my computer is not being nice. Sorry, y'all. All right, let's try that again. 5x minus 20 have to be less than 60. What you have to caution yourself about is it also always has to be larger than 0. And when I say that, that means this angle can't be less than 0. I'm not saying x can't be less than 0. I'm saying the measure of this angle can't be, has to be bigger than 0. So from this statement here, we've done these before. You just want to add 20 to all three parts of it. So 20 is less than 5x is less than 80. Then divide by 5, and you will find out that x has to be between 4 and 16. Okay, last problem. I have, again, two sides that are congruent. Two sides of one triangle congruent to two sides of another. And I'm looking at the angle in between them. Okay? 9 is opposite angle N. 7 is opposite angle K. So I know that this 3x plus 18 has to be less than N. So 3x plus 18 is less than 90. And of course, as we just said, always has to be greater than 0. So I'm going to subtract 18 from each part and get negative 18 less than 3x less than 72. And then I'm going to divide by 3 and find out that x is between negative 6 and 24. And that is all you have to inequalities in two triangles. Please don't hesitate to email me or come see me if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching, and y'all have a great day.